So you stand on the precipice of a decision. The decision is whether to transition or not. And for a lot of us, that's a very, very difficult decision. It's not that we don't think we're trans or don't know we're trans, but we live in this world and this world is screwed up. And especially if you're transitioning later in life, you're blowing up your whole life. Possibly you're married, possibly your work isn't very supportive. There's a million things that can go wrong. And so many of them have nothing to do with being trans. It's just whether we're going to come out or not, and whether we're going to transition, and what that transition looks like. And that is such a personal decision. I know that there is no right answer for everyone. For some people, it could mean life and death. For some people, it could mean something that they're not willing to give up. And I think when I started transitioning, I was very fortunate. I grew up in Canada, and I think I was a fly by the seat of your pants kind of person. I never really even considered all the things I was going to lose. I just was like, well, this is who I am, and this is what I have to do. So here goes nothing. Maybe it wasn't the best decision, but actually it ended up being the best decision because, of course, I'm so much happier now than I was before. So, but again, you're making this decision whether I should transition. And one of my clients said it best. She's like, I knew it was the right path because I was terrified, but I was also exhilarated. And I was like, well, that's interesting because that means that you're probably going in the right direction, right? Because if you're terrified, it probably means you're getting ready to lose all of that safety, and of course that's terrifying. Um, but if it's not terrifying, it probably means it's too safe. Maybe you're not willing to sacrifice everything. Maybe you don't want to. Maybe it's not for you. I have a lot of clients who that's a really, really challenging part of the transition. It's not the transitioning part, it's the all the other people part, and what that's going to do to their life and their loved ones and family and friends and all of that stuff. And then the other side of it is that it's exciting. It's exhilarating. Why? Because for once you feel alive and you feel the possibility of hope and possibility. And for someone like us, someone like me, for example, I felt dead on the inside. I knew I wasn't, this person. I didn't know who I was until I figured it out. And then when I did, all of a sudden I saw all the hope and possibility of what could be. Even though wasn't guaranteed, it just, there was a possibility of that. And I think that's what brings me down to this kind of this place where there's like a fork in the road, right? And on one side of this fork in the road, you have fear and anxiety and a lack of a lack of safety, I guess, so you would call it. But your fear and anxiety, your emotions, and these strong emotions that can dictate behavior. And then on the other side, you have hope and possibility. And you're standing on this decision of whether to make this really, really huge decision. And it's not that you're making the decision on whether you're trans or not, it's more you're making the decision on whether you're going to transition or not. And there's so many trans people that never transition. It doesn't take away their transness or their identity. It just means that for whatever reason, personal reasons, they chose never to transition, or maybe transition fully, or whatever it is in that person's life. So you stand looking at this, you're standing here in the middle and you're like not sure what to do. And so many people get stuck in that spot. So, you know, paralysis, paralysis by decision, I guess, and they sit in this spot where they can see both sides. They can see how their life will blow up. They can see, or they can imagine, or they can, have all this anxiety about what's going to happen, all the bad things that might, very well could happen, but they also might not happen. And because we don't know what's going to happen, we live in this world of fear because it's going to ruin our lives potentially. It's going to ruin friendships, ruin relationships, ruin a career, all of this stuff. And you have all of this anxiety because you don't know what's going to happen, right? And and that is very, very powerful. Not to minimize that at all, because I think so much of life is kind of rooted in, and decisions are rooted in that, because we don't know what's going to happen. And I'm worst case scenario Victoria here, and I always imagine the worst possible thing that could ever happen, even things that actually require magic or some other intervention of some sort that would, ruin it, for example, for me. And then I start, eliminating those impossible scenarios, and then, I work my way backwards, kind of thing. But then on the other side, you have the hope and the possibility of what could happen. And I think for me personally, in my transition, I held on to that so much. Um, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know where I would end up. I didn't know that I would be this happy. I had literally no clue. I definitely hoped for something. I don't think I ever imagined in a million years that I would, at the beginning of my transition 6 years ago, that I would be here, talking on Instagram and trying to help other people, and or YouTube as well, and trying to help other people, and saying how I had what I would definitely have considered a successful transition, not because of how I look or on any of those other things, but because I feel so much that I'm in my most authentic place, and as a result of that, have flourished. I always think, taking off the mask isn't becoming a different person. Think about when you put a Halloween mask on, you're not becoming a different person. And I kind of think people are kind of like light, different kinds of light, different hues, different colors, different wavelengths, all of that stuff. And the mask dims that light. There's still a couple of beams of light sticking out, but as you start chipping away that mask, your light becomes brighter. So you just become more of yourself. And so I feel like my transition was very much like that. I became so much more than I ever thought I could be. And I think that's why I feel like my transition is so successful, I guess. And as a result of that, I've found to be myself to be so happy and so fulfilled, and obviously wanting that for other people as well. So fear and anxiety sits here, and hope and possibility sits here. And depending on which one you focus on, which one you look at, which one you give attention to, which one you believe, that will very much end up dictating your path. And so, not to say that everyone should do this thing, or would never, ever, ever say that to anybody, because it's such a personal decision. But at some point, you're going to have to come to a reckoning of some sort. And that reckoning is to decide whether you choose to believe in what could be or what couldn't be. And I would always say to somebody, look at what the possibilities are. Look at what could happen. Look at maybe falling in love for the first time as yourself, and that person falling in love with you as the real you. Look at interacting with the world as yourself, and being happy in those moments, being happy in your identity and loving yourself and seeing yourself and, you know, just existing and feeling at peace. And sometimes that means that you have to go through this really difficult phase. Not going to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. A really that's a real thing, even for the ones who are very lucky, who had wonderfully successful, happy, short transitions. It still sucked, sucked big time sometimes. Um, but here I am on the other side of that time, and I can say how incredibly worth it was, because what I did was I focused on what could be, and I was like, be damned with what couldn't be, and screw the fear, screw the anxiety. I've lived with those my entire life, and I'm done with them. And that's maybe the lesson for today. Think about what could be, because what could be the most beautiful part of your life. Bye, everybody.